So my choir always sounds the same, and you know, when I first started teaching, it was, let's just try to get them to sound good in some capacity. It didn't matter if everything sounded the same, right? And then as I started looking at more difficult repertoire, I was also faced with this idea that, that doesn't really fit into this sound that we're, you know, that we make just when we open our mouths to sing. So why make a change? You know, there's several schools of thought out there about if good singing is just good singing, then manipulating the instrument or modifying the instrument in some way can be of real value to your students, especially the ones that think that choir is all about the traditional ensemble. And I feel like nowadays, especially with the current contemporary composers that are out there, they are asking you in the program notes in the front of the score to really think about sound in a different way. So in terms of affect, how we do that, how is it connected to the text in some way? Is it about style and genre and being, I hate this term but I'm going to use it, culturally appropriate in some fashion? And then, quite frankly, it's your personal preference because you are the artist. And then, what is color and how do we use it? So, color is tone, as you know, and I like to use color with the kids because I think it connects to them faster than when I talk about tone, which can sometimes, if you go into all the pedagogical stuff, it gets a little heady for them. So I just talk about it in terms of we're lucky because we get to come together and make lots of weird noises. And then we experiment with that. So these are some of the words that we typically use. This is one of Brad's things that I stole, and I love it. So I watched him with a group of high school kids at the Kentucky All-State a few years ago. And then I went and I watched him with his own ensemble. And it was really interesting to me to see how he can, have any of you seen him work, actually? You ever seen? Okay, great. Are any of you Millikan grads? No, okay. Because I thought, oh good, there's help in the room. So one of the things that he uses, and he uses it with his home ensemble too, he calls it the resometer. And what that is your gauge for where are we on the spectrum of color of sound. So if you'll do this with me, it's a little I Dream of Jeannie exercise. And when we're this way, it models the shape of the embouchure when you're asking them to be forward and bright. And so we go from, and we're gonna just sing on a, I don't care, you can just pick a note in that chord. And you're gonna sing on an E vowel. And as you get to the back side of the sound changes and you allow a lot more space in it, and then everything in between, and we'll talk about that here in a second. So if you would sing that chord on E, as bright and as ugly as you can make it. So there's a really big smile on your face when you do this vowel in particular. Kids love it. Ready? Here you feel it go from front to back. So there's a great way to just give them, now they have this aesthetic and they're starting to feel it in here. So when you're playing with the crayons or you're playing with that, that spectrum of sound, then you can start increasing their vocabulary with, they often know when they're young, they hear the vibrato in your voices. They may or may not possess it. So you can talk about that. Again, I like this to spin or not to spin, depending on the color you're asking for. The different resonators. So where does the sound take place? Without it being too scientific for them, the head, the mouth, the chest, the mask. So if you put your fingers on your cheeks and you sing a darker ooh space, ready on that same chord. And now as I move the resometer forward, think about trying to touch your fingertips with that sound. Here we go. And the really cool part about that for them is that it automatically crescendos. The biggest thing I took away from studying Brad, yes, he's got a lot of strategies and I'll get into those, but it was really his rep. and not just the rep, but where he placed it in the program. So the order of the program makes a really big difference in how you hear the color shifts. So thinking outside of the box, that's definitely his mantra. He doesn't get stuck in anything for too long. One of the big things that he uses the resometer for is that early American sacred harp singing. And if you've ever experimented with that, the kids will love it because they get to break every rule in the book. And you know, diphthongs are a huge thing in that, and it oftentimes has stomping and clapping, so you're adding something physical to it. So these are the 4 things I'm going to talk about that that I felt like coming away with were really profound things that had impact on the sound. The ask a question strategy, the way in which he works with vowels, this idea that your sound has to fit in, and the relaxation piece of it. You just went, ah, 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 ah. Try that. Here we go. Ah, ah. And then you just relax and let it all dump on the decay. Again. Ah. And that immediately, I bet he spent 5 minutes on just that exercise. And then he would change the vowel. Ooh, 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 ee. So it's the same thing that's connected to that resometer, just in a slightly different way. Visuals are the gestures, a lot of this. The sound sensation, where do you feel that? So try it again on, how about the eh? Eh? So if I were to say, where do you feel that sensation in the question, what is your response? Obviously the lift, right, in the soft palate. So you might have smart kids that go right there immediately, right? You might have that, they might say, well, it feels like there's like this big dome inside, or just to get them thinking about what they feel. So the resometer, what is it? It's just a placement exercise. And then you could attach that to actual colors. So if you already use colors in the rehearsal, like you'll say, I would really like that to be more warm, more like this beautiful gold color, or it's red, it's hot, it's fierce. So once you've done how it sounds and how it feels, now attach something visual that they can think about to it. So you've layered that memory for them. It may relate to volume, it may not. The placement, forward versus back, tall versus horizontal, now you've given them picture space. A lot of, as you know, you probably use this one or this one to talk about embouchure. Collapsing in the vowel oftentimes is what happens. It's very specific. It's what happens when we lose the sleeve. And that is specifically, so let's sing the warm-up. I love to sing. Just sing that how you normally would. Ready?
I love to sing.
Great. Now, I'm going to change the vowel, and we're just going to do D, 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 D. Ready, go.
D, 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 D.
And now you're going to sing that phrase through that sleeve. I love to sing. Ready, Ethels?
I love to sing.
Great. So that's a sleeve of sound. You might not. First, you have them do the vowel, and it's great if you can demonstrate it for them. If you're not, if you don't love the sound of your own instrument, or for some reason you don't want them to hear certain aspects of your instrument, you can also just speak it for them. Do, 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 do. Or do, 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 do. And you ask them to keep the same space for every single pitch within reason. Ready? Go. And if I were to respond to that, if you were my ensemble, would say the third pitch is where it changed, where we fell out of the sleep a little bit. It went doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. So having them really focus on, if that's the sleeve, you've just put a big old wrinkle in it, and now we have to go back and do it again. So how does your sound fit in? This is funnel your strength. That funnel your strength in your ears, your eyes, and your voice. So in what you see in your neighbor's embouchure and in facial expression and how those two are oftentimes interconnected or married to one another. Listening inside the sound, not just to your sound, but to the sound around you. What happens if you drop out for a second and you listen and you come back in and now you can hear yourself again? Is that a problem? What if you can't ever hear yourself? Is that a problem? And so once they're forced to listen in a different way, because in working with young teachers, I found that they would say, you need to be listening more. To what? Outside and inside the sound is around you and then inside your own head. We don't, or at least I never did as a performer, I never like to listen to my own performances because you don't sound the same in your head as you sound in a recording, right? For them, it's fascinating because they are not hearing half of what you hear on the podium. And once they are convinced that the proof is in the pudding, so you're recording those rehearsals and they're hearing the growth and the difference, and especially in rehearsal because that's where the change is happening. They're going from one directly into another. That it has to feel comfortable and it has to be relaxed, and you have to be relaxed in order to do it. You can't overthink it. You can't be high anxiety that day. You can't be nervous that somebody's going to think it's ugly. If you've already set up a safe environment in your classroom, I would have some of them demonstrate that individually for you, especially if you've got kids that are really with it and can do it well. So this is Brad's chart that he created probably 25 years ago. And this to me was, I think, the best thing that I took away from him. I will use it in my choral methods course next semester. I haven't actually shared it with my choir yet. What this is, it's the way he perceives where the sound comes from. And the two spectrums are about vowel space and vibrato, meaning speed and amount. So the early American stuff, over here, it's not as bright as you would think. It's that whole idea that it's square. So it's sort of right in the middle of the vowel space, but then there's literally no spin in it. It's just that straight sort of kind of sound, which is probably, for me, I would only be able to take so much of that. And then if you think about Renaissance, same idea, only much taller vowel, and still sort of on this left spectrum of not as much spin. The classic versus the romantic, you guys know about that kind of stuff because this is a little bit simpler. As you get out here, this is where all the big singing is happening. So it can be that you can choose to only explore that if you have the forces for it, like the horses to do it. It can also be actually that that's an opportunity to let kids know what their extremes are, even at the high school level, if you do it appropriately. The age-old saying that you never sing past beautiful, that's true even for the opera courses and some of the spirituals and Russian Christmas music and that kind of stuff.
I am new to this world, I arise here this morn.
So that's them doing their sort of vocal jazz. And then this is Runestad's. I'm only showing you this because of the stuff he uses in the beginning. You know the nyan nyan. So I love to use this as an example because many of you know it. So whether or not you've taken it to the extreme, sorry for the yourself, and I definitely think your singers will enjoy the opportunity to prove to you that they can.